let's start right off the bat, Eric. What can you say, or what can you talk about, or anything? Because it almost seems like you got over to WWE, and you almost didn't even get out of the starting gate there. What went down there?
I've talked about this before, and I really mean this. I know it's going to sound like I'm being evasive, or I don't want to talk about it. And that's not really the case. It's just chemistry, man. WWE is a phenomenal company. They really are. No matter what you think of the in-ring product from time to time, if you look at them as a business and what they've accomplished, it's nothing short of amazing. It still amazes me just sitting here thinking about it, in this conversation. But they got there because of a formula, because of a process, and it worked very, very well for them. I don't think I fit into that process or that formula. My way of looking at the business is different. My approach to creative is probably significantly different, and I just don't think it was a good fit.
Could you give me one example that you could discuss where there was just a major philosophical creative difference where you were like, bro, this ain't going to work. I can't work like this, or this is not the way I work, or something like that?
It never really got to that, and I can't really discuss too much internal stuff in the process. Yep. I signed an NDA, so there's, I have to be very, very general about the way I discuss this thing. There was no moment. There was a moment or two, I guess, while I was there the first couple months. I think the first month and a half in particular, where I went home and I told, my wife, Lori, do not fall in love. Do not fall in love with the furniture. Do not fall in love with anything you buy here. We came here, in a 5x8 U-Haul trailer. We're going to leave here in a 5x8 U-Haul trailer, and we may be leaving sooner than you think. That idea, that thought crossed my mind early on, and I was right.
Let me ask you a question. When you're so what's your thought process like as you're leaving Wyoming and you're driving across the country? Are you feeling like, I'm sure that had to be difficult because, bro, going from Wyoming back east, torture for anybody, I can imagine. But what were the second thoughts like as you're making that journey?
I didn't have any. I was really excited about the opportunity. It was a very, very, it was a great opportunity. It was a great job. It was a great opportunity. It was, as I said, WWE is a phenomenal company. So I was very optimistic. There were certain things I knew I was going to miss. I knew, not growing up, obviously I grew up in Detroit and Minneapolis and Pittsburgh and Chicago. So it's not like I haven't lived in a city before. But I've gotten really accustomed to having a lot of space around me. I love the mountains. I love to be able to hunt, fish, and ride horses and do all kinds of things outdoors. And I knew I'd be giving a lot of that up, if not all of it. But I was okay with it. I wasn't, I didn't miss it. I didn't have second thoughts about it. I knew that I was taking on a challenge. I knew, it wasn't going to be for long. In a best case scenario, I didn't see myself staying at WWE for more than 2 or 3 years, tops. That was kind of the plan. And I figured, for 2 or 3 years, if I can do something substantive, something meaningful and leave the industry on a high note, that is a hell of an opportunity. And I was willing to sacrifice kind of the short-term things that I enjoy for a little bit more of a long-term gain.
I have 2 quick questions and we'll leave WWE alone, but I am interested in hearing your answer to this. Is, Eric, when you were there, what were the major differences that you had seen, for good or bad, that the business had changed you were in there internally between when you were in WCW and WWE?
Konnan, I don't think the business has really changed all that much. It still is about 2 people, 4 people, whatever, however many people in the ring. It's the action, it's the storytelling, it's the characters, it's the emotion that you can create in the ring. That's never going to change. Now, the presentation may evolve, as it has, I think, over particularly the last 5 or 10 years. And Konnan, you were a big part of that. It probably goes back 20 years when you brought, Lucha Libre into WCW, and I give you full credit for, bringing the luchadors in and establishing, that lucha style on such a large platform, in the United States, that was the beginning, I think, of the evolution of the business. And people started expecting more athleticism, more dynamic, performances in the ring. And, the big man stuff had kind of faded away in terms of the audience's appeal to it. And it's
how long did it take you to understand that, Eric, for you to actually grasp that? Because at the beginning, it had to be very foreign to you because you didn't grow up around that.
Yes and no, Konnan. I mean, there was a reason I brought, the cruiserweight. There was a reason I established the cruiserweights, before, bringing you in and the luchadors in, because I knew a faster pace. And again, it goes back to Japan and so much of the stuff that I was seeing in Japan that I personally really enjoyed. I enjoyed a much more physical, dynamic presentation than the kind of cartoonish wrestling that was, dominant in the 80s and 90s. So I established the cruiserweights to have something in the ring that was different than, a lot of the bigger guys and the way that they worked. But where you're right in terms of me not really fully appreciating it, I don't think I really started to appreciate the significance of what Lucha brought to the product in general, not just the luchadors themselves, but their influence on what we see now in the ring is undeniable. I don't think I recognized that fully until probably the last couple of years, because now I'm not in it. When you're in it and it's all right there in front of you and you go from this show to this show to this show to this show, it's all just, you don't really have time to appreciate or understand or analyze it. Really. Now, especially, with doing this podcast and going back and watching shows, and where I can go back and really see, I can watch a show from 1995 and see the presentation there. And then maybe the next week, Conrad and I will be talking about, a pay-per-view from 1998 or 1997. Well, there's night and day difference between, not across the boards, but for the most part, there's a night and day difference between the product that you were watching in 97 and 98 and the product you were watching in 94 and 95. And I don't think I really appreciated that until recently.
Now, at the beginning of when you were talking about WWE, you threw this little caveat where you said, regardless of what you may think about their in-ring product, which I don't think is that good right now, do you think, Eric, it's more when you talk to Vince McMahon, are we talking about a 70-year-old man that, it's very hard to know, to have your pulse on pop culture, what's the best music right now, what's really hot right now? Or do you think it's more because the company's so big and it has so much programming, it's hard to have great storylines across so many shows? You know what I'm saying?
I think it's the latter. Look, while Vince McMahon and I may see things completely differently creatively, I won't say completely, but close to completely differently when it comes to creative and storytelling. Look, Vince, while he may not have his finger on pop culture, there's a lot of people in WWE that do. And he listens to them and he allows them to kind of pick up the slack as the case need be. But I think the overall situation with WWE is because they've gotten so big, television is such a central part of their business model, and that television has changed. You can't do the types of things that even we did, Konnan, in Disco and WCW in 95 and 96, 97, 98, even 99. You can't do that anymore. Television has changed. Culture has changed. And I think if you're going to cater to the television industry, which they have to do because of the way their business is structured, and television is going to be reactive to the culture in general, and I'm not just saying the PC culture, but when it comes to violence, when it comes to some of the things that we did, back in the 90s, you couldn't do those things today. And that tends to sterilize or sanitize the presentation quite a bit. And I think that's the biggest challenge. They've become, I don't want to say a victim of their own success. I guess that wouldn't be the right way to say it. They're a $5 billion company. I wish I was a victim of that. But at the same time, I think, one of the reasons that we're not seeing a completely different presentation isn't because Vince doesn't have his finger on the pulse. It's because the industry won't tolerate it.
I give you just basically gave an answer to a question I wanted to ask you, but to extrapolate this further is like you're talking about like things you can't do today because of the PC, the outrage culture. It used to be, bro, what was it like back in WCW? You would have to get phone call from people complaining. Like they would literally have to phone in and complain to turn around and stuff to have their voice like to realize that we were doing something that was going overboard. With social media these days, it's like, bro, all the complainers are free to just voice their opinions all the time. And it's like they have more things to complain about. It's like you get, and then, like you said, they're putting a blanket over a lot of things that we would like to try in professional wrestling that are proven formulas for success.